So the question is, has Bitcoin topped? This has been popping up in my feeds all over the place in the trading groups I've been dealing with. And I thought that Raoul Pal's his take was pretty interesting and worth a listen. So we'll break down his latest thoughts that he did on Real Vision and check out some downside targets on our charts. I talk whether or not Bitcoin's bull run is in danger here. Quick second.
Not global money supply, global liquidity does going forwards. We know back in 2017, the Treasury drained the TGA for the same reason. I mean, it's like literally everything is an exact rerun of what happened. So look, I don't expect an exact rerun this time, but probabilistically speaking, there's nothing to be concerned over. Now, when we looked at that big M2 drop last time around, this time around, it leads by about 12 weeks. So last time around, we had an identical M2 drop. You can see it. I don't know if you can share that chart you're looking at now after that one. So this one shows the near identical pattern in M2 back then versus now. What happened was the dollar weakened, global M2 went up. What also happened is the NASDAQ had a similar correction, crypto very similar. And what crypto did was didn't follow M2 going forwards because it starts to decouple as the bull market takes place. And what happened was it did an 8-day correction and did negative 35%. This time it feels like it's slightly more sideways. Whether it goes a bit lower or not doesn't really matter. But the point being, you're looking for the bottom as opposed to a sharp acceleration from here. But either way, it's over pretty quickly. And then what happened last time around is the moment Bitcoin hit a low, alts took off. And so that's my general thesis on all of this right now. This is pretty much playing out exactly as I've been expecting it to play out. And whether that's in liquidity terms, because it's a rerun, because we've got this debt cycle, it's the same bloody thing, right? So that's my overall view. It's like, it's all fine.
Do you think?
Okay, fair enough. And definitely, I think highlighting the cyclical relationship between Bitcoin and the alts is pretty predictable in general. As Bitcoin hits its all-time top, there tends to be these new breakout opportunities in the alts, which can be fairly easily measured, something that I definitely pay attention to as well. What's your take here, Tom?
All right, I just wanted to bring up something over here, a couple of things to put on the chart. Because Raoul goes on more to talk about some of these things. You could always take a look at his video if you're interested. Can you hear me clearly?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. So the idea here is that he's saying that there was a correction that happened in 2017 where liquidity or global dollar liquidity was headed down, but and Bitcoin was falling, but then before the liquidity bottomed, Bitcoin took off. And the reason he's bringing that up is that he's bringing it up the last time Trump was also in, or around the time where the discussion was in the office. And he goes on to discuss here this idea here. I'm trying to share my screen. And for some reason, the button's not working, so we'll leave it at that. The idea here is that the dollar was also going up then at the same time. And the question here is, there's always Forex games or game theory being played out on the global stage, because the currency is one of the tools or weapons that a country can use against another country, especially if you're the global reserve currency. And so the idea here is that the rise in the dollar, that the America is allowing the dollar to strengthen in order to put on pressure on foreign nations, especially China, in order to get them to do certain things economically that they need them to do. And that what they'll do once they capitulate is then head in and now do everything that they need to do in order to get the dollar to go down. Thinking I really want to get this thing working. I'm just going to refresh my chart because I want to show you this on the chart. If you give me a second. Bang. Actually, would you mind pulling up the DXY? Because I can't share my screen for some reason. And what you'll notice is that there are periods where the DXY will rise sharply, and then you'll have like the drop like recently, like there's a big, if you put this on the daily, yeah, so on the daily, if you pull out some, perfect. Yeah, if you go to the left a little bit, you'll notice that we had the big rise yeah, exactly, that big rise from the bottom, and then it dropped down. During COVID, also there was that spike right at the in 2020. There was like, yeah, so there was that drop, and then there was a drop right before that, um, where yeah, right there where we had the COVID drop, and then previously the one before that, that's when Trump came into office, and then boom, the dollar came down. So the idea here is that it's a carrot and stick situation, that they make deals with other countries. When they acquiesce behind the scenes, then they go, okay, now we can lower the price of the dollar, and put less pressure on those countries. So the some people are saying that that's what's happening here. That once Trump gets into office, they make the deals, and then now they're gonna allow the dollar to fall, and that would coincide with rate cuts, global liquidity coming in, and boom, a skyrocket in assets. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But what I wanted to bring up is that even though we're getting a downtrend in global liquidity, um, sometimes Bitcoin rises sharply, even when global liquidity is lower. And Raoul brings up the case of 2017 where this happened. So because this is what we've been looking at, right? This drop going, hey, what's going on? This is normally offset by he said 12 weeks. Some people say 70, so let's call it 7 to 80 days.
Mhm.
And it actually matches pretty accurately. And if it continues, the idea is that this would mean that Bitcoin would fall to, let's say, around 75,000 if you
That's
map it.
Yeah, that lines up with even a technical measurement I've done on that same thing. But I know the other way you've measured this is to pull the liquidity index onto the same chart, but then offset it by roughly 70 days, right?
Correct. Yeah. Actually,
So we'll have to
I
test.
have an indicator specifically for that.
Yeah, I
Let me
forgot
pull
the
it up.
offset when I wrote this one.
No.
Uh,
Yeah, you can't do it there.
yeah, I can't do it here. So just looking at Bitcoin though, like the measurement we're looking to make here is effectively relative to that global liquidity, which is offset by about 70 days. I do agree. I think that there is some potential for a continued pullback here. I was curious if yesterday was going to make a break of this recent support zone at roughly 91,000. We found support there again, but I still think, we could be looking at signs of a short-term pullback that continues, largely just because we've posted a lower high at this point. And it's kind of anyone's guess if this is a continuation from here. But I would expect that if it continues this way, Bitcoin's price obviously continues down and retests this original support level of 74,000, which was the area that I was originally looking at as a break of structure. So if we measure this whole range here from a Fibonacci perspective on the log chart, that also lines up at 0.5, about a 50% retrace at the $73,000 line, which is where I would expect support to show up. And if not there, then a little bit further at the 0618, which is about 66,500 on Bitcoin.
Right. So, and I've been looking at this from essentially, to me, this has been a tale of two channels. Let me just share my screen real quick. So the idea here is that we have this channel headed downwards, and then we have another channel headed upwards. And that's over here. And the idea is we're really at an inflection point in this area. If we break below this trend, let's call it 94,
Yep.
potentially we could be bouncing all the way down to this level here, which is the weekly VWAP that has not been mitigated. So I call that 88,000. But we also have one down here in the 70,000s that we haven't actually gone down to.
Yep.
I find that hard to believe that we get down, maybe a wick, but I find it very hard to believe that we'll get all the way down there because of the timing of things. We also have to keep in mind here, let me just backtrack. So the question here is, have we topped, right? And so the question is, are there any signs that we are at the end of this of the cycle, of the business cycle we have right now? And I don't see that.
Short term, yes, we have topped from this current range. I do think we're going to see a pullback. Where we pull back is the question. Long term, no. I think we're still going to see continued upside on Bitcoin from here.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So Bitcoin normally does anywhere between 30 to 50% pullbacks regularly, even during a bull.
Sure. Yeah, typical drawdowns in Bitcoin are somewhere between 70 and 80% if we're observing the end of an actual cycle, right?
Exactly.
And that has become less volatile over time. It used to be 90% pullbacks. Now we're somewhere in the 70% range. So I think if we're observing a real pullback in Bitcoin in the end of a cycle, in the beginning of another 2-year winter, if you will, we're going to need to see a lot more than a 35% pullback, which is what I'm expecting right now.
That's right. And the leading indicators for that sort of thing usually includes with it the setup incentive for the incentive for the powers that be for monetary and fiscal policy to pull back liquidity. And there is no incentive for that. The election's over. The United States wants to take control over some of the conversation that's happened on the global stage. They have the ability to lower the dollar and inject liquidity. They're just not doing it to the extent that we would expect. So we have to assume that they're not doing it because they don't want to do it. And so, to me, all the signs here are pointing that we're just waiting. Let's wait till to see what happens. If we get a sharp correction in the window weakness between mid-January and March, and then come April, I can expect low off tops. So to me, it's like I'm starting to accumulate leverage long. Everything for me is leverage long. For long positions, and for short terms, I'm just expecting these bounces, and I'm fine if I lose out on the downside. I don't see we're going down to 60 K on Bitcoin.
Yeah, I don't know if it goes that far. I definitely think we're going to see some short-term pullback, which is interesting because I think that lines up with where I believe equities are going. So there's this great opportunity to open some puts and hedge against some of that downside. Interestingly, I think the rest of the crypto market is kind of anticipating that as we look at the BitVol index. And for the last 6 months or so, we've been hovering in this zone of overall volatility around 62, which is fairly elevated to areas where we've seen in the past where Bitcoin is fairly bullish. That volatility has slowly started to tick upward. It's pulling back a little bit as of late, but to me, this is an indication that the options market is still pricing in some future volatility.
I see. Interesting. All right, so I guess I just want to end by saying this thing here, which is something that I have a friend of my best friend, and he's the kind of guy who doesn't follow.
I'm not your best friend, Tom. What happened?
He's the kind of guy who doesn't follow the day-to-days of the market, but when he contacts me and says, should I buy Bitcoin or should I sell Bitcoin, he's a top end and a bottom signal. He's as reliable as Jim Cramer. Just absolutely fantastic. And I tell it to his face, and he still does it. And when he contacts me and says, and it'll be sometime soon if Bitcoin falls a little bit more, I think I'm going to sell my Bitcoin. I think it'll go down further. Then that's going to be my sensation of, okay, now we've bottomed, which is I'm sure it'll be around 80,000 and move back up.
Those are good people to have in your life. Always take the inverse of those trades.
But the thing that I find so hard to convey to people, I don't understand when people say that, is what is it that you think you're buying? If the idea is that you think this could potentially go to $1 million a coin, why on earth are you selling because you're worrying about a 30% draw or 50% draw? Like,
sure,
if you're a long-term holder, every drop is an opportunity for you to buy more, if that's your thesis.
Well, that's the problem, is that it's very difficult to maintain a very long-term thesis. I know that was my struggle with Bitcoin early on, and it's obviously the biggest opportunity cost in my entire investing career. I just didn't know how to hold long on Bitcoin because I never knew where the future of it was going to be. And remember, I started buying Bitcoin back in 2012 when prices were nowhere near as high as they are right now. So the struggle from here, particularly if you're a long-term holder of any cryptocurrency, is where do you imagine this being in 5 to 10 years then? And that is the hardest narrative to predict, because it's just not the same thing as the narrative of a company. You pretty much know what Coca-Cola is going to do in 5 years from now, right? I pretty much know what Microsoft's going to be doing in 5 years from now. I can't tell you whether Bitcoin's going to be priced even higher in 5 years from now, especially if cryptocurrencies stabilize over time and they become less of a volatile, risky asset, and they become more of a utility in terms of an ecosystem that emerges from this whole new burgeoning industry.
To be fair to you, though, I'm sure you didn't time all your Bitcoin purchases at all-time highs.
No,
which is what my friends do. They'll go,
No,
it's all-time
that is
highs.
true.
Now it's the time to buy. It's safe now. I go, this is the exact time it's not safe. What are you even talking about?
Yeah, the one thing that technical analysis has given me the ability to do is time when to start accumulating and when to start taking profits. And I did manage to take those appropriately.
Excellent.